1, 2, 3. The main narrative in Parsha Shlach is naturally the story of the spies, the Meraglim that Moshe sent from the desert to bring back a report regarding the land of Israel. Now, the narrative is not clear to us what happened here. In the Parsha of Shlach, it appears, says, Vaydaber Hashem al Moshe lemor, the Rebbeinu Shalom told Moshe, Shlach lecha anoshim, send people to spy out the land. So it's a commandment from God. Heaven tells him to send spies. And he follows naturally. However, Moshe himself in Chumash Dvorim reviews the matter. And there he says, Vatikrabun elai kulchem, the masses of the Jewish people approached him, and they said, Nishlachona anoshim, let us send spies. We're going to a country, we have no intelligence about it. We don't know anything about it. So let's do it in a rational way. And Moshe said, I accepted their suggestion. So who is behind this, so to speak? Now Rashi is naturally aware of this problem of apparent contradiction. That here in our parsha in Bamidbar, it's God telling him to send the spies, and in the Chumash Dvarim, it's the people that tell him to send the spies. So which is it? So Rashi comes up with a compromise, because our parsha begins Shlach lecho anoshim. The word lecho, on your behalf, to you, is extraneous. The Torah could have said Shlach Hanoshim. Satisfy everyone. And therefore, since Moshe had the option, he decided to send the spies. So that's how Rashi and Chazal saw the matter. In other words, all of this is extraneous. It never should have happened. There's no necessity for it. But the Moshe here appears to be wanting in leadership. So Moshe is convinced of the wondrous quality of the land of Israel that he can send spies. He knows they're going to come back with a good report. He knows that it's all going to turn out well. So therefore, he feels perfectly safe in risking the matter by sending the spies. It turns out that he miscalculated. The Meforshim explained that he miscalculated because one of the spies was his Talmid Yoshua. Vayikra Moshe Loshea bin Nun Yehoshua. We meet Yoshua before in the war against Amalek. We meet Yoshua at the Maseh Egel. The Torah describes Yoshua Nar Lo Yomush Mitoch Ha'oel. He is studying Torah. He's Moshe's clone. So Moshe, therefore, is of the natural opinion that if Yoshua is there, it's like he's there. And that therefore the people would not dare to say anything against the opinion of Yoshua. And he knows that Yoshua will give a positive report. So therefore, he doesn't feel that it's a risk. Because he said, Yoshua, there's a famous anecdote regarding Rabbi Yitzchak Blaser, the Bitzler Petterberger, who was the disciple of Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. He was the main disciple. Later on, he lived here in Yerushalayim, and he rests on Har HaZeitim. He was a man of extraordinary wisdom and qualities. So in the 19th century, Jews were not allowed to live in St. Petersburg or Moscow, in the imperial cities. In the middle of the 19th century, that decree was relaxed because there were a number of influential, wealthy Jews, mostly assimilated, but who wanted to live in St. Petersburg. And they formed a community there. And they built a big synagogue there. You can see the synagogue today. I had the ability to be in that synagogue, to see it. And so the synagogue needed a rabbi. So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter said to his Talmud, to Rabbi Yitzchak Petterberger, why don't you go and you'll be a positive influence, and you'll make a big difference. So Rabbi Yitzchak said to Rabbi Yisrael, he said, I'm afraid to go because they'll have an influence on me. I'll be the only one. And over a period of time, instead of my influencing them positively, they will influence me negatively. He said, Rebbe, I'm afraid to go. So Rabbi Yisrael answered him, whom shall I send? Someone who's not afraid? You have to be afraid. Otherwise, no one can go. So Moshe here is in the same position. He's going to send the spies, but one of the spies is going to be Yoshua, and Yoshua is Nar Lo Yomish Mitocho. Well, he's the devoted student of Moshe Rabbeinu. He'll be a positive influence. There's a risk, naturally, but he's confident that Yoshua will carry the day. But in fact, what happens is that Yoshua and Kalev are able to withstand the influence of the other Meraglim, but that the entire project turns into a disaster. And that the 10 spies twist the facts to make going to the land of Israel very unappetizing. And that generation, because of the spies, is doomed to die in the desert. Yoshua and Kalev survived, but everybody else is gone. So we have here this basic question, which I discussed with you. Who told them to send the spies? And it seems from Rashi and from the biblical narrative itself that Moshe bows to the will of the people here and is somehow confident that it'll all turn out well because he has Yoshua as one of the spies. And that's the pshat in the posuk. It says, Vayikra Moshe leYoshea binun Yoshua. So Rashi says there, he added a yud to his name. In other words, he added God's name, so to speak, Yud K, to the name of Yoshua. Ko Yoshiacha me'atzas meraglim. The Lord will save you from the ideas of the spies. So in simple explanation, we thought that atzas meraglim means that Moshe knows in advance that they're going to give a negative report. So he gives you a blessing not to follow that report. If he knows that they're going to give a negative report, why does he send them? So the understanding here is, Ko Yoshiacham atzas meraglim. I know that you will be of such influence that their atzas, their thoughts, will not prevail because you're there. And you are like me, and the Jewish people will be forced to accept the will of God because they are the Sgula Mikol Ha'amim, and they have no choice. So that's what it means, Ko Yoshacham atzas meraglim. When you're there, and you're Yoshua, so no matter what the Meraglim say, they won't listen to them, they'll listen to you. And that was a miscalculation on Moshe's part, because the atzas meraglim prevailed. They were more than willing to listen to what the Meraglim said. So that's one issue that exists in this story. What's Moshe's part in it? Who is the catalyst for all of this? The second issue, which all the Mefarshim deal with, is why did they give a negative report? Why did they see that the glass was half empty when they could have said it was half full? And in fact, they did say, look at the wonderful fruit of the country. They said how beautiful it is. They said how people grow up there strong and big. It's a wonderful place. So why did they take that and turn it into a negative? It's too good a country. The people there are too strong. The fruit is too big. It's unusual. We don't want to live that way. Not only that, they were accustomed to living in the land of Egypt. The land of Egypt is not dependent upon rain. The entire, even today, 75% of the population lives in the Nile Delta, along the banks of the Nile River. So the Nile supplies them with water, with fish, with vegetation. That's what they're accustomed to. The Nile does not reach the land of Israel. We do not have major rivers here. And the Jordan is a trickle. So we have to rely upon heaven, right? It rained this morning. That's what we have to rely upon. They didn't want that. They weren't accustomed to that. And what compounded the problem was that while they were in the desert, they ate the mun and they drank the waters of the well of Miriam, which are supernatural events, and which took place outside the land of Israel. They're told that when they come to the land of Israel, all of this will be turned off. And no more mun, and no more magical wells. There's the nature of the world, right? There's rain. And if, God forbid, there's not sufficient rain, there can be drought. So one of the reasons was that they didn't want that. People who live a supernatural life don't want to live a natural life. That's part of the adjustment, in my opinion, of living here in the land of Israel. Is that since our survival in the exile was and still remains supernatural, so when we come to the land of Israel, we don't want it to be natural. We want it to continue to be supernatural. So we don't want to be dependent upon economies and all sorts of things in the world. It's hard for us to adjust. If for 1,800 years you're living, so to speak, miraculously, and now you have to live naturally, it's difficult. Someone happens often, I've had it in my experience, that young men in their 30s come to me and say, my father-in-law promised me that he was going to support me for 10 years. And he kept his word. And the 10 years are up. What do I do now? which is a real problem. Because if you're accustomed for 10 years, to get a check in the mail, and you don't have to do anything for it, and now all of a sudden, what are you supposed to do? Especially since you didn't use the 10 years to gain any skills or profession or means of earning a livelihood. So you're stuck. That's what happened to the Jewish people. They every day the mun fell at their doorstep. The waters of the well of Miriam were always present. And when they weren't, there was a rock that Moshe drew water from. When they wanted meat, there's meat. Now, all of a sudden, the check stopped. You have to do it by yourself. That's a hard adjustment. And that's why we see in the book of Shoftim that it took the Jewish people almost 4 centuries to adjust to living in the land of Israel. Now, in our time, we want it to happen in 4 minutes because we are impatient. But it's a process. And there are parts of the population that still are not part of that process, which makes it even more difficult. And Chazal always saw it that way, that there are times that the people, so to speak, hide behind piety. Somebody comes to a wealthy man and he asks him for a loan. And the man says, I'm not going to give you any money, but don't worry, God will help. He's not looking for God to help. So we rely upon God, who said God has to help. Where did that enter into our collective thought process? So that's one stream that the Meforshim discuss, that the Meraglim gave a negative report because they did not want, or they were unable to imagine how the Jewish people, millions of people, are going to live a natural existence after the miracles, the Exodus, and the 40 years in the desert. There's a second idea that's advanced here, is that, and this is, I think, a very important idea. If you want to have a plan, you don't get 12 people to come and give you the plan, because then you're going to get 12 different plans. And once there are different plans, everyone is invested in their own plan. What they say is right. The other 11 don't know what they're talking about. So we find later that Moshe only sends 2, Yoshua and Kalev. Then Pinchas and Kalev later, Yoshua sends them. He doesn't send 12 anymore. He doesn't want 12 opinions. Because if you want any sort of legitimate guidance, the more people you ask, the more confused you're going to be. That's the problem of democratic government. The crazies also have a party. They're also entitled to say what they want to say. And therefore, you create a society that is fractious and difficult to control, and that is always dissatisfied. The 2% that hold this and this program are dissatisfied, and they will express their dissatisfaction. So by sending 12, if we open the door for the fact that there can be no unanimity here, there can be no one policy. If there's no one policy, then we remain where we were. We're going to stay in the desert. Because we have no plan as to how to adjust to the future. The idea of monarchy that exists within Judaism, Som Tosi Melech HaMelech, is based upon the fact that at the end, somebody has to be responsible. You cannot satisfy everybody all the time. Someone has to take the bit in one's mouth and move it. That's very hard because we all want to be popular. We don't want to have demonstrations in front of our apartment. So it's better to leave it alone. Even though the problem festers, and leaving it alone is not really a healthy or wise option. So the problem lay when they said, Nishlechono Anoshim. Let us send many people. So Anoshim means at least 2. Okay, 2. But 12? And the Torah purposely lists their names because each one is an entity unto itself. The tribe of Asher wants something that the tribe of Zvulun doesn't think is important. Can't agree on that. Like, for instance, here in Israel or in any country that is not totalitarian. So you have a budget. The government has a budget. They're going to spend X number of trillions of dollars. Then the question is, how do you cut up the pie? Well, you cannot cut up the pie and satisfy everybody. No matter how much money there may be, it can't happen. And therefore, the more people that are involved in creating the budget, the less likely it is that it will come to a true consensus. And that's what happened with the Meraglim. It's not that 10 voted no. 10 voted 10 times, each one for its own program, for what it wanted. And Yoshua and Kalev said, Yitova Oretz Ma'od Ma'od, it's a very good land. We'll go there and we'll figure it out. They don't have a budget, so to speak. So that's a different way of looking at the Meraglim. Then there's a third stream. There are many others, but we only have limited time. That stream says the people realized, the spies, that when they come to the land of Israel, they're not going to be in office anymore. The leaders that were in the exile are not going to be the leaders of an independent country. It doesn't happen that way. Even in halacha, there's a question. There's a strong stream of thought amongst the Israeli rabbis and the Israeli poskim. I'm talking about covering the entire gamut, that they do not take into consideration the opinions of the great rabbis of the exile. They are interested
That's her?